talking about journeys, destinations, culture, adventure, gear, conservation, and all the things we haven't yet thought of. This episode is brought to you by Kuckuck, the compact mobile home in a box. Designed and manufactured in Germany, the patented Kuckuck camping module is perfect for those free-spirited and spontaneous travellers who need the diversity of a daily driver, workhorse, and a mobile home while maximising the versatility of a single vehicle. Ideal for a wide selection of estate cars, vans, and 4x4s, Kuckuck combines a kitchen, double bed, and storage space all in one box. Simply place Kuckuck in your boot, and the mini mobile home is good to go in just a couple of minutes. For more information, visit their website, kuckuck.info. That's spelled Quuqq.info. A link can be found in the description below. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the At Overland Europe podcast. You may remember that a couple of episodes ago I spoke to the lifelong adventurer and explorer Stefan Fischer, just as he was preparing to leave for a trip to Moreton Island. Just to recap, Stefan, the driving force behind the popular YouTube channel All Off-Road 4x4, is a huge overlanding enthusiast with a ton of experience gained whilst navigating the rugged Australian outback. Well, he's back, and this is the promised follow-up to that exciting trip. And because I can't wait to hear what he has to say, let's dive right in. Stefan, it's great to have you back on the show. And I know you've been very busy, as usual. And today we want to talk about your most recent adventure, and that was to Moreton Island. So let's begin. What actually drew you to go to Moreton Island?
Yeah, it was actually a double trip. So there are two sand islands reasonably close together in Queensland, not too far distance from Brisbane. And I've been on both, but my last time on Moreton would be easy 10 years ago. So very long time ago. And I always had the idea of doing both islands in one trip. And that is pretty much what we did. And we started with Moreton Island. What drew me to Moreton Island? I guess I have to tell a little bit about Fraser. Fraser is a better known island. It's a bigger island. It has more adventures. It has dingoes. But Moreton Island is kind of the little brother of that. And it is a little bit closer. The ferry over is actually longer, but it's closer, say, from Sydney. Moreton Island, the difference is, or one big difference, beside that it is an awful lot smaller. So you can pretty much drive around the island probably if you wanted to in one day and do most of the treks there. It doesn't have dingoes. And good, that's a good or bad thing, however you want to see that. I mean, I love dingoes. It's great to have them on Fraser. But it does add a little bit more complication, especially over the recent years. Yeah, dingoes, very briefly. I mean, we come across dingoes reasonably frequently, especially on our desert trips and so on. And by nature, dingoes are pretty timid animals. You usually don't get closer than, say, 30, 40 meters. And that's their safety distance, and then they're off. So you're actually glad you see one. Fraser has a population of purebred dingoes, the most people would say. Pretty pure. But the problem is that a lot of people come there, a lot of tourists, and a lot of people don't have a clue. And dingoes by nature, for example, are very scrawny. They look like they're underfed and starving, but that's just how they look. That is normal. And people then start to interact with them and think it's a domestic dog and call them and feed them and leave food outside and so on. So over the past 14 years since I go to Fraser, I've seen quite a difference in dingo behavior. And nowadays it is so that every year there are multiple dingo attacks that people really get hurt by them. I mean, we had instances where as adults, I actually had to take my camera off the tripod, use a tripod to defend myself, kind of. Early in the morning, a friend of mine, when we were camping together, he did some astrophotography at night. And I went to bed early, and all of a sudden I heard yelling and screaming. So I squeezed out of my stretcher, and then he was bailed up by a dingo, which just wouldn't go and had a go at him. So it took the two of us to chase that dingo away. So I'm still like Fraser, and I love to see the dingoes, but it's just a bit more complicated. You can't just wander off. Nowadays, it's that most campgrounds have PVC sticks standing there. So you walk around with a stick.
Oh, wow.
With a PVC stick. And actually, last year or 2 years ago, my kids went for marathon. My son, who's 15, he watched, what's that name? Some American crazy fella, some army guy. And anyway, he told him he ran a marathon without doing anything. So Kane decided he runs a half marathon. And I wasn't really sure whether he would. And he ran along the beach for 20 kilometers. And we caught up with him. I got my daughter out. She ran back with him. And they then got bailed up by dingoes. I mean, you're not supposed to run if you see them, especially if they're in packs. But my kids are pretty savvy there. So they both back to back had the sticks, and, took them probably 10 minutes or so to get the dingoes to disappear. So if you have someone who is scared there or doesn't stand its ground and is afraid to use a stick or starts running, people do get hurt. People have gotten killed, I think one or two, but that wasn't very recent. I think it was actually, can't remember whether it's an English or French backpacker from memory. They had a bit too many beers at night, and he slept on the beach and then got run over by a pack of dingoes.
Not good.
So, anyway, but back to Moreton, sorry. No dingoes there. That means you can walk wherever you want. And another big benefit for me is that on Moreton Island you can have campfires, which on Fraser there are maybe 1 or 2 campgrounds, I think, but that are more the commercial campgrounds, I think, where you can have a communal fire. But in general, you can't have fires on Fraser Island. So Moreton it was as the first trip. And
So this was the first time you've been to Moreton?
No, I've been to Moreton before. Wasn't probably the first, but one of my first 3 or 4 trips when I started 4-wheel driving was to Moreton. So it must be now 11, 12 years ago, I would think. And that was with the family. That was still with my Defender, where my ignition barrel relay gave up on Moreton. And so I had a car which started sometimes not. And it was quite interesting because if you sit in front of there's a little pub or so, and then you can't start the car anymore for half an hour. Yep.
People love it.
Have you had that as well?
Not quite the same. We did actually, we drove back from Italy once in a Series 1 Land Rover. And it actually worked out quite well because we got from Italy, we got to Cologne, then we went from Cologne to the Channel to catch the train under the British Channel or the English Channel. And when we came out the other side, we went to a car park at a service station, pulled in there, and all of a sudden, all the lights went out. And it was one of those situations like, what just happened? And you could turn the key, you could press the starter button. This thing was dead. And we ended up having to try, and this was in the middle of the night as it would be, trying to go through all the different wires to get it to work. And then all of a sudden it's jumped back into life. We then drove to London to see a good friend. And we were so close to his house. I said, we'll be there in 5 minutes. And we were looking for a parking space, and we literally drove around the block. And at a major crossroads in London, the thing died again. And if you could press buttons, turn keys, nothing worked. And it took ages, and we were trying to go through. And again, it was still dark, and we were trying to go through the wires, etc. And so if you know the situation as you've just described, sometimes cars don't start. It always seems to happen in a place which couldn't be worse if you tried. So I know the situation. Yes,
and I think it took us 3 months to isolate it, because as soon as I was at the mechanic, it always started perfectly. The most embarrassing thing was on the way back, where we parked at a big service station at Port Macquarie, and I made the mistake it was on a slight angle. It was summer outside, people everywhere, completely packed. And I jumped in the car, hit the clutch, and let the car roll backwards before actually trying to start, to just roll out. And I was half out of in the road and then started and it wouldn't start. So we spent there 20 minutes blocking the road. Yeah, it was in hindsight, it was funny. At the time, it wasn't.
No, especially when all the people around you start getting a little bit uptight about it all as well.
Yeah, and Land Rovers have their reputation, so I cemented that.
Well done, you. So back to Moreton Island. Yeah, let's talk about some of the standout moments, or maybe something you hadn't anticipated occurring. I don't know. Tell me a little bit of the adventures.
Yeah, standout. When we were there the first time, we camped on the western side, which is the side towards the inland. So that's Moreton Bay there. That is calm waters. If you stand, depends on obviously the weather, but most times it can be, not a single wave, green, turquoise water. And you can stand there and watch the sharks swim past, the whales swim past, the turtles swim past, the dugongs swim past, if you spend enough time. So very beautiful. That's usually the side where you go more swimming. Then the eastern side is obviously towards the ocean, rougher, and usually also more wind. And I never camped on the eastern side, so we only camped on the western side the first time. We drove once around the island, and I knew there was some World War II history on that island. Mm-hmm. And last time we only found really one old kind of, not even bunker, more like an old gun emplacement. And we weren't too impressed because it wasn't really that much. But I knew there were others which we didn't find. So that was one of the missions on this trip, to really find more of the World War II relics. And we were very successful there. That certainly was, for me, definitely one of the highlights. Yeah.
Just one question I forgot to ask earlier on, because you catch a ferry to the island, don't you? But it doesn't have, as far as I've seen from the video, it doesn't actually have a sort of a port as such. It just rocks up to the beach and throws you off. You drive off.
Yes, it rocks up to the beach, and it's a bit like D-Day landing, I think. You have the ferry flaps come down on the sand, and then you drive out. And that's where it's often quite entertaining, because even though we have social media, even though I think there is tons of information out there how to sand drive or how to not get stuck in sand, some people just don't get it. And we watched, actually, it wasn't on our ferry, we watched another big YouTube channel coming off the ferry when we were there. And within 5 meters, they were stuck and throwing up sand, and took 10 minutes until they get unstuck. It could have been that makes more dramatic footage, but it is reasonably common that people don't air down. I mean, we air down in Brisbane before we get on the ferry, right. And then, you just drive off, and usually no problem. But again, it's often entertaining if people don't air down. Yeah. Or forget that they have to go in 4-wheel drive, for example, center diff in and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you have to be prepared. Do your homework before you get there anyway.
Yeah, that's advisable. I mean, Moreton is less challenging than Fraser. Mm-hmm. On Fraser, you really can have, in my opinion, but I'm doing it for a long time, I've never been stuck in sand. Never. I mean, I've maybe had my forward momentum stop, but I've never been in sand where I needed traction boards or any kind of recovery in 14 years. And touch wood, I hope it stays that way. So I think if you follow a few basic principles, that's why I made these sand driving videos some time ago. If you follow a few principles, 99.9% of the time, you should not get stuck in sand. Okay. So it's usually user error.
Okay. Maybe we'll put some links to those videos in the description below later on. You were saying about camping. Are you allowed to do wild camping as such on the island, or is it always within campgrounds?
No wild camping, no. It's within campgrounds, but I dare to say for European standard, it's probably reasonably wild. I mean, there's a mix of campsites, really. We camp on the northern end, or northwestern end, or we camped initially. And it's probably, say, 2-3 kilometers on the beach, or just behind the dunes, behind the beach, and you just pick a spot there. So actually, they are even numbered, but it's not like on some caravan parks where you have your 2x2 meter or 4x4 meter, not 2x2, 4x4, 6x6 meter. So you have a bit more room, and we were there off season, and yeah, there was actually hardly anyone there in our campground, I think, or where we stayed the first 2 nights. We were by ourselves there.
That's nice.
Yeah, but it is so, unfortunately, I don't know how that is in Europe, but it's more and more now in Australia that you need to pre-book everything. And that's a horrible idea in my book, because it takes all the spontaneity out of trips.
Yeah.
When traveling with my kids, when they still were a bit younger, it was actually very difficult to pre-book unless you know the camp spot, because you want to find something which is suitable for the kids, depending on where you are, where you don't have cliffs or where you have a good eye on the kids. So really booking unseen is silly. Yeah. And on top of that, it also now means that, because it is not that expensive most of the time, but that means people just book 2 or 3 spots and then pick the one they like, and all the others appear to be booked, but they are not booked. Yeah. So it is fairly common that you rock up to a campground which there's nothing available, but half of it is free. And not none of them, but a lot of these spots obviously don't have internet or mobile phone connection. And that means you cannot just drive in, pick a spot, and then book. That would be, I guess, a feasible option. But that also is often not the case.
You're saying that you could, in actual fact, if you wanted to, drive around the island in one day. So it isn't that big. Are there several campsites, or is it one major campsite which people go to?
No, there are quite a few. Okay. And in comparison, I think I lost my train of thought there before. On the first visit, we only stayed on the western side. And this time, because a friend of mine, actually, I was there with at the time, said, the eastern side is not that nice and it's too rough. But that is not the case. I mean, the eastern side, I rated actually higher now. Yeah, depends on, it's different really. But it wasn't what he mentioned. So it's very sheltered. The water not. You have more waves, and the ocean is much rougher. But a lot of the camp spots on the eastern side are behind dunes, so you're a bit out of the wind. Yeah, and it is absolutely stunning. So if you go there, I definitely would mix it up, spend a few days on the western side, again, where if the weather is right, very calm, and the ocean for swimming and so on is beautiful if you don't get eaten by a shark. And then do the eastern side, which probably for kids not that ideal, because you won't see when they get eaten. If they get eaten on the western side, you see it because the water is calm. On the eastern side, it is a bit rougher and waves, and so it's a bit more hassle,
Yes, hassle you really don't need. Is the island populated then? I mean, do people live there all year round?
Yes, there are. There are, I think, 2 small townships.
Okay.
On the island, but there's no tar roads as such. Are there any? I don't think so. No, I think it's on Fraser. You actually have 1 or 2, not roads, strips in populated areas, but I don't think there's any tar from memory. So you have 2 little townships, and you have 1 resort, which is called Tangaloma Resort. Which is kind of, actually it's quite nice there, apparently, because you can watch dolphins coming to the beach every day for feeding, or every night. But you have to stay at that resort for it. It's all a bit more exclusive, and the beach is blocked. You can't just go there. So the townships, but I think even there are obviously a few permanent residents, but most houses, even in their townships, I think are more holiday houses from people in Brisbane who then go over there.
So based on that, I guess there's also a little bit of infrastructure that you've got, maybe a shop or 2 where you can pick up some supplies.
Yes, you have. I don't think you have a fuel station, actually. But yes, you have, I mean, where we were in Comboyan Point, there is a kind of a beach bar slash shop slash, little restaurant, where you get a lot of the essentials. Actually, I think they also probably have a few. We never filled up there, so there probably got to be somewhere a Bowser on there. But yeah, have a little ice cream addiction, so we certainly had a few ice creams there. And then you have one big oyster farm where you also can eat fresh oysters. Very recommended.
Oh, good.
Freshly shook. So that is nice. And then you have the bar. Forgot what's called now. Yeah, there's one kind of bar on the other end of the island, on the southern end, which it's also, you can't actually you can get food there to eat, but it doesn't have a shop as such.
Okay, but it basically means that if you do forget something, you can normally find a replacement or whatever you need locally. Then you're not completely lost.
Of basic stuff. I mean, you won't starve there. Put it like that. It's the first time I've seen that the Boulevard Bar had actually an ice maker machine. I mean, there are still people who use eskies with ice in bags until electric fridges or so. I mean,
it was normal, yes.
Yeah, it was normal. I still have one somewhere in the garage there. And there is now a big machine. I mean, as big as a tiny house, as a cabin or so.
Oh, wow.
And that spits out ice by the bags and cold water. So you pay for your water and your ice there. But the campgrounds also do have, or at least where we were, not all of them. Some of them have drop toilets. Some of them have basic showers. No hot water, obviously, but to get the salt water off. So you have some basic amenities, and very nice that you can have a fire. For me, camping on Fraser, you don't have that, so it's the only spot. But camping without a fire is only 80% camping.
Correct. I'm with you on that, definitely.
Yeah.
It sounds though as if the island is sort of quite well organized, but does that have a sort of a negative impact in that some of the adventures taken out, because a lot of people going there, are tracks well maintained and not so challenging, or can you still find nicely challenging routes?
As I mentioned before, I don't think there's anything challenging in sand unless you're silly. I mean, if you drive out at low tide into the tidal areas, or past the normal receding of the tide, where you get quicksand and so on. Yes, that is silly, but no, there's nothing really challenging on Moreton. Actually, Defender story. That was the first time I was there. On the northeastern side, when you go to the beach there's something like similar to Champagne Pools, which is kind of a bit a rock formation where at high tide the water flows over and it creates kind of a whirlpool or so, which is quite nice to go for a swim. And to get there are multiple ways through kind of tidal inlets. And I had the Defender, I had my air flaps open, and I thought, at that time I was fairly new. And I thought, can't be that deep. It was. And
you're now talking about the air flaps underneath the windscreen, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And so they make a very good water intake. And that was the end of my radio. So that was many, many years ago. This time, obviously, I was with the Land Cruiser. But yeah, you should watch. That is probably the only danger there. Some of these lagoons, and that's actually fresh water there as well, fortunately. So I avoid salt water like the plague. So you won't see me in shots where I'm driving through the ocean or so. That doesn't happen. So some of these holes are pretty deep. So if you don't check that, that's probably the most difficulty you can have there. Okay. Otherwise, there are not really many hills on Fraser. It's definitely can be more challenging on Fraser than on Moreton.
All right. Here's a question for you, because there are lots of coastlines which obviously have tides. Is there a sort of a rule of thumb, a golden rule, where you say, right, the tide's gone out, but you shouldn't actually drive on the beach just yet because you will sink in? Because, okay, the water visible on top has gone, but underneath, I don't know. Is there a golden rule about time between driving and not driving?
Yes and no, not for the reasons you mentioned. I know where you're coming from, but that really depends on the area. In most cases, I mean, on Fraser and Moreton, we got actually caught by the tide. You can't go around Moreton if you don't time the tides, because there's one piece of coastline on the southwestern end where you actually at high tide, you just can't pass there. And that's where I think we get to that later. We found a secret track kind of shortcut, which doesn't exist anywhere on any maps. So in general, for Fraser and Moreton, the best time to travel is 2 hours before and after low tide, in general. Mm-hmm. So that is where you travel and you usually get through. But that is just for access, because you don't want to drive over the foreshore. And especially on Fraser, you probably can, unlike Moreton, you theoretically could always drive, even at very high tide. But then you would have to drive over vegetation and foreshore, and for environmental reasons, obviously, we do not do that at all. But on Moreton, the shifting sand dunes of the big sand hill, it's pretty much reaches into the water. And that is, I reckon, I don't know actually how high it is. I'd say 100-meter dune. It's pretty high. Pretty high, actually. Yeah. You have done quite a workout if you get up there. And that ends in the water. So at high tide, you can't drive there. Right. But what you are referring to, not really so, actually it is on Fraser. It's not so much on Moreton. On Fraser, you have some of the coffee rock formations, while the islands are sand. Coffee rock looks like rock, but it isn't actually. It's organic matter and sand, which is compacted over millennia, I don't know how many years, and it's kind of rock, but it's not. I mean, if you stand there with a spoon or with a finger, it's much, much softer than sandstone. And actually, I think there are few proper cliffs, but a lot of the stuff is coffee rock. Yeah, and if you drive around there, and there's usually permanent water, but obviously at low tide is fairly low, and that can be fairly soft, and people lose their car there every year, driving too deep into the tidal areas, and yeah, you can lose your car there. On the western side on Fraser Island, you also have, actually, you're not allowed to drive there. That's one of the reasons. And you have seaweed banks. That's also something which you have on many of the coastal beaches in South Australia and so on, where you have some of the best sand driving ever. And it can be very deceiving because you only see sand, but under the sand, you can have up to half a meter of seaweed. And once you drive on that, that is the end,
just sink in.
Because you just sink. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's usually a bit, that would be, something where you need a recovery and winch. But if you do a lot of sand driving, so far we always manage to spot it. And then you have areas, especially in Tasmania, also some awesome sand driving, where you can really have quicksand. And that can suck your car in within 10, 15 minutes. Half your car is gone, and you're never going to get that out unless you have a big tractor.
Yeah. Wow. But Moreton isn't that bad.
No, I mean, Fraser, every year though, people lose their car. It's usually young guys who do not understand what they're doing.
Over enthusiastic.
And if you then drive, trying to get around that rocks, that is usually where what becomes their undoing. So every year you see 3, 4, 5 on social media, brand new cars often, just stuck there floating, and obviously that's a write-off.
Yeah, not good. Anyway, but I mean, you obviously prepare for your trips. I mean, we've spoken about it in a previous video that your car is pretty well equipped anyway. Was there anything special you took with you this time?
No. My car is, as we mentioned before, my car is pretty much always ready.
Yeah.
No, nothing special. I had my induction cooker with me, and I tested actually a new battery bank one of that all power banks. And had my induction cooker with me, which came in quite handy because we had, it wasn't as calm as we hoped it should be. That was Fraser and Moreton Island. So we had quite a bit of wind. And that obviously takes, with gas, that can be a bit painful to cook then. And yeah, with the induction cooker, that's pretty easy then because wind doesn't really matter,
Yeah, that's right.
But no, otherwise, what I didn't do this time, I should have done. Actually, I kicked myself there. I usually give the car a good underbody spray with lanolin.
Okay, protecting against any salt residue and stuff churned up or...
Yes, protect against the salt. And usually I do that. I don't know why I didn't do it this time. I somehow missed that. But yeah, it's one of the first things as soon, not after Moreton, but as soon as I come off Fraser, there is actually a specialized underbody car wash. And that's at Rainbow Beach. And yeah, we always go there and do a double underbody wash and get as much salt off. I mean, as I said, I don't drive through salt water, but obviously the wet sand and so on, you always have some salt coming in.
Yeah. All right. You were saying earlier on that there was relics of the Second World War sort of across the island, because I believe it was not a stronghold as such, but certainly from the defence point of view, a very key position for Australia.
Theoretically, it was, because it would have been the gateway to Brisbane. And yeah, if Japanese would have come there, apparently, I think there was one Japanese submarine in the bay at some stage. But yeah, if the Japanese would have landed in Brisbane, they would have come past there. So from Moreton Island, they had some... I have to look it up, what it was called. They had some submarine detection cables running there in various directions and could monitor, incoming submarines. And there were also quite a few defensive positions on the eastern and western side of Moreton Island. With big guns. I mean, they never were used. They never came. Yeah, no enemy came ever close. But everything was ready there to defend Australia at the time. And I didn't realize that there was so much there. As I said last time, we only saw that one, and this time we dug a bit further and still missed one part. So I have to go back there again, because we realized that on the western coast is actually also one, but that's within the township. And that's the only stretch of beach you can't drive. So you have to go inland. That's why we didn't see that. So there are still 1-2 installations in there, which I want to see next time. But everything on the eastern beaches, and that were, I think, the main installations we really found. And you have to go a little bit of looking and a little bit of walking. But it was amazing. I mean, how they built that there. They are really underground bunkers with several rooms and big gun emplacements on top of dunes overlooking the ocean. Yeah, fascinating. It's
a proper sort of historical site then. Is it well conserved? Is there an organization behind it which looks after it?
Well, look, it's all national parks. But yeah, one thing Australia doesn't do well in many ways, and that is for indigenous historic sites, but also early settlement sites. Australia doesn't look after them very well, which is a pity. And a lot of these sites, which really should be preserved, no one bothers, I mean, these locations, you have your graffiti and stuff in there, which is disappointing. But it is solid concrete, so they will last for a bit longer. But yeah, Australia is not very good in preserving its history, be it early settlers or even indigenous, besides locking it up. That seems to be the only preservation we know here.
Yeah, it's a bit defeatist on the one hand. Yes, it protects it, but it prevents you actually going to see it that way, doesn't it?
Correct. And I don't know whether it really protects it. Often stuff needs to be looked after, and if no one goes there, it's not looked after. I mean, that brings us to different subjects, but the big fires we had 3-4 years ago, they burned kilometers of protected forest where no one is allowed in to enjoy, and it's all gone, hectares and hectares of it. Because that also means there is no access to it. The fire service can't get in. And, 4-wheel drivers, I reckon what we do, obviously you have also some irresponsible ones, but the vast majority, we do keep tracks open. We leave everything, at least we do, better than we find it, and look after the bush. If you lock everyone out, national parks doesn't have the resources to do it. So it seems to be counterproductive.
I always think of Australia, and it's maybe me just being very biased, that you have lots of creatures. You were talking about sharks in the sea, and is there a lot of other wildlife on the island as well?
Well, I mean, it's quite a bit of bird life. I think the most visible is probably the marine life. I mean, whales, dolphins, you name it. I mean, if you spend 3-4 days and you don't see any, you probably wouldn't have looked well enough. Otherwise, no, not really too much. I mean, I'm always glad if I see some snakes, but we didn't see any. They're certainly there.
Can't imagine why you'd be glad to see some snakes.
Beautiful, beautiful animals. I mean, we used to have one, or my son had one when he was a bit young. That one was a bit bitey. And after the 6th time, she hung on his forearm and tried to eat it. He was a bit younger than 7 or 8. I think he was over it. But he wants a new one now. So, we have handled snakes at home. Not poisonous, obviously. I love snakes. Beautiful, beautiful creatures. So I'm always glad if I see them. Don't see them often enough. And we have, a lot of pretty poisonous snakes here.
Yeah, change the topic. I'll tell you what, there is something which I saw on your video, and that was some, just presume, sunken ships. I don't know if they were put there deliberately. I didn't watch the end of the video.
Yes. So, and that's, guess we have to come to that. That's a highlight, I guess. So in front of not in front of the Tangalooma, but not too far from that resort, there are 11 ships scuttled, probably 300-400 meters off the coast. And I heard multiple explanations for that. Some people say to create an artificial reef, but I think originally it was more done to actually provide some safe harbor for smaller ships who could shelter behind the ships in rough sea. But the side effect obviously is that it does create an artificial reef. And that's certainly one of the attractions. And that's a fairly touristy spot. You can do tours there. You can hire paddle boats. You can hire masts and the likes. But it's beautiful. I mean, you can swim out there. As I said, 100, 200 meters maybe, depending on whether it's high or low tide. And then you can snorkel or paddleboard between the scuttled ships. And it's tons of, again, marine wildlife there, fish. And very, very nice, because the water on most days is turquoise and it's like paradise, So definitely worth it. There are another 3 ships were scuttled where we camped, not far from us, in front of Bulwer, which is one of the little townships there, and where also that cafe is. But I wonder, because they are now nearly on the coast and there's not much left. You just have some skeletons, so nothing really. There's no artificial reef or something less. Right. You just have a little bit of rusted metal.
How long have they actually been there then?
Good question. Can't remember exactly, but
must be quite a long time.
Yeah.
Because if they're sort of rusting away and there's not a lot left, I mean, it must have been there quite a while then.
Yeah, there must be there. There must be there quite a while, actually. Now you want to know. See whether we can quickly find that. Probably can. 1963 and 1980s.
Wow.
So well, wasn't too bad. 40 years or so. Yeah.
I wonder if they'll be putting more back as these further deteriorate, or if it's just the last time they've done it.
I doubt it. I mean, nowadays, yeah. Look, who knows? I doubt it. I mean, certainly nothing has been done with the ships in front of Bulver, which really don't do what they were supposed to do anymore. But the island is really shifting. There are some sand dunes on there which are constantly on the move, and I would assume that the ships in front of Bulver were much deeper in the water.
Yeah.
And now even at high tide, you don't have to swim there, you can walk there.
Oh wow.
And there's not much left. I mean, the ones at Tangaloma, but there were 11 of them as well. So, and that are some bigger ships there. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, if you watch it on the video and you see the footage there and you see all the fish and turtles and swimming in between it, it's
beautiful.
Cool.
Absolutely beautiful. It's probably definitely worth taking a drone there then, definitely.
Yes, and at the moment you can actually drive there, fly there. Australia becomes very restricted in everything. All the freedom we used to have here, it gets more and more clamped down. And for someone, I love photography, I love videography, and many places you're not allowed to take photos anymore if it's with a drone, which is ridiculous, But anyway.
That's very restrictive. I mean, we have the same problem here, without doubt, that, you've got to do your drone pilot's license, and there are many areas where you cannot fly, full stop.
Yeah. Oh, look, I mean, common sense, I don't fly where I annoy people or endanger people in general. And the most spots I fly is very remote. Yeah. There would be no one. And the reasons given, they do not make sense to me, put it like that.
Okay, you've just saying, you do a lot of photography and videos, etc. What kit do you have with you? What cameras do you use?
Oh, too much. It depends on really the trip, I have a lot of stuff here. So what I always have is a few of 2 drones usually, because sometimes at DJI stuff, sometimes electronic, I think I made a little thing in it. Everything is electronic now, which, look, it's obviously great in many things, but also a curse because a lot of it can go wrong. And so I have 2 drones if one fails. Then I have a few of the DJI action cameras,
right.
Which is, a better version of the GoPro. And then I have some Sony mirrorless cameras or Panasonic mirrorless cameras, and a bigger Panasonic X20 video camera, more the production-wise big thing, but has a very good zoom in. But that I don't take on every trip.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. I'm going to interrupt you here. DJI, the better version of the GoPro, is what you sort of said a moment ago. We were recently in the Western Alps, and I'd used a RAM mount and a GoPro, which I'd stuck on the front wing of the Grenadier. And typical scenario, you're driving along, it's a little bit bumpy, but it wasn't that rough. And all of a sudden, the RAM mount let go. And as opposed to jumping off sideways, it jumped forwards, and I promptly ran over everything. Really disappointed. When I got out of the car and I looked down, and it actually looked as if everything was still in one piece. And then I turned it over, and of course the camera was shattered and couldn't use it anymore. And when I got back, I thought, if you don't ask questions, you'll never have an answer. So I sent GoPro a message saying, unfortunate situation, I've run over my camera. And they asked my telephone number. They actually called me and said, you do realize that is not covered by our warranty if you run over it. And long story short, we had a very amicable discussion. And he said, hang on a second. And he went away and asked his supervisor or whatever and came back and said, you know what, we're going to replace it for free. And that sort of gave me food for thought. And I was at a point of saying, well, if it's gone, it's gone. I'm going to move to DJI. And they came and were very, let's say very supportive. And that made me stick with GoPro.
I could say something to that, but I'd probably better not.
Why not?
Look, I used to be a fan of GoPros. I had every iteration from the GoPro 1, but the amount of footage I have lost because having GoPros, I can never get back because far too many issues. I still think GoPro has a slightly better image quality if you're really picky in some situations, but the GoPro never works when it's supposed to work, at least for me. I found it incredibly difficult to remote operate, which for me in the car, I constantly do. And yeah, I gave up with the GoPro probably 3 years ago and have never looked back, because DJI is also not perfect, don't get me wrong. But I'd say with the DJI, I get 95% or 98% of all footage I want to take. And with the GoPro, it would have been 50% or so, because it overheated, it stopped, it froze, it couldn't connect. So in that regards, I definitely, while not perfect, DJI is a better option there for me, at least,
Yeah,
But I understand. I mean, their stock price, GoPro, is down in the basement, and I think they're happy if they can give them away. So I know I had GoPro issues support wise, and that may be also different in Europe, but here in Australia, it is a few years ago. Maybe it has changed now, but it was horrible.
Yeah, I think they were just they were having a good day because, you don't have to replace something you've run over. And the reason I was thinking of DJI as a replacement, as opposed to saying, well, I'll just go and get the latest version of the GoPro, was with mine, I keep getting sort of the red light of death. You want to use it and there's a red light on, and the thing is, you have to take it apart. You've got to take the battery out, which if it's in a housing or on somewhere mounted, it's just a pain in the neck. And also the remote, as you say, if it's outside the car and you want to switch it on because you're driving into a certain area and you're using your phone and it just says there's no connection, that sort of that can really ruin everything, because that's not what it's there for. It's meant to be doing a job, and it's not necessarily doing it. Yeah,
literally the shots I didn't get, which would have been such stunners that at some stage I pulled the plug there, because that just can't be. And the locations I go to, some of that locations you never go again. I can never repeat that. So for me, the stuff really needs to work. The vast majority of the time, and that certainly wasn't the case there. It's such a pity, because I don't understand it. It wouldn't be that difficult. They were such a market leader, but it seems to be the same with a lot of companies. Apple is going down that way now, in my book. At some stage they get too big and lose focus on what put them where they were, and that then usually is a slow downfall.
Yeah, I think DJI have come a hell of a long way. I mean, if you look at their range of products today, I mean, obviously drones, yes, they've got all sizes of drones, from very, very, let's say, basic to highly professional cinematography scale of technology. But action cams, handhelds, they really are covering all the bases right now.
Yeah, and while not perfect, they do it very well. And I mean, software-wise, you also have glitches, but functionality-wise, they are fairly easy to use. I think they're also bringing out now a full-frame camera, a normal camera, I heard. So yeah, they're doing that. And in regards to the DJI Action or the GoPro replacement, I mean, they can connect to my drone 5 kilometers away and give me a full HD image. So they have figured it out to have connection. A GoPro I can't connect when it's half a meter from my phone. Yeah. So DJI really they're doing a pretty good job. And I mean, not the leader there for nothing, which is also bad, because there's no competition. There's no company who pushes them really to be better, which is always dangerous. But
they seem to be very self-motivated in that sense, because they are growing. They are covering more product ranges. As you say, if they're now coming with a full frame camera as well, that's going to eat into the popular markets, whether that be Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatever.
Yes.
And I also believe that because they've always been so strong with their drones, that they have a very loyal community around them. And the opportunity then to expand the product range you've got. I don't know to what extent maybe battery packs, etc., are compatible amongst the different products. But if you could do that as well, that gives you much more, let's say, stability when you're in the field. But I just think, if you're using a DJI product and you've got lots of different types of product, the compatibility on screen on the computer at the same time when you're working through footage, etc., is not bad.
Yeah, and they're far more agile. I mean, let's face it, the Sony, Nikon, Canon, they are light years behind. I mean, obviously they have mirrorless cameras and that is all good in regards to optic, but in regards to operating system, to AI, to modern features, which every mobile phone has, to usability, they are light years behind. And if DJI goes in the market there, they have a pretty intuitive user interface. They have all of that figured out, which, Sony couldn't figure out in the past 10 years, which is shocking, really. So yeah, DJI will be, I think, a big disruptor if that's going to happen. I certainly going to be having one of the DJI cameras, or very likely, that's for sure.
Another one to your collection.
Yes. Yeah. Until I run out of room,
That's one way to look at it. So if I was going to go to Moreton Island or even Fraser Island, is there anything which you would say either take this, do this, or more to the point, don't do that? What sort of advice would you give somebody who's never been there before? And the reason I'm saying that is because there are lots of people from Europe who are shipping their cars to Australia and spending, I don't know how many months there, but they're obviously going to make the most of everything that they can see. So what would you advise them in a situation of visiting Moreton Island?
I would say they should have a bit sand driving experience. I mean, Moreton probably a little bit less so, but Fraser, there are now actually quite a few restrictions in place. So a lot of the backpackers could hire cars, drive them onto Fraser and so on. And I actually have at least one of that accidents on film. And that caused some very tragic accidents because people think it is a highway. On the beaches, for example, at low tide, the speed limit is 80, but you got to be a bit aware because you have tons of little rivers coming into the ocean, and especially during higher tide and during midday, it's very hard to read the sand, and you have often, I by myself, not following my own advice, I cracked my rear axle there, being pushed for time and driving faster than I usually would drive because I'm very aware of that and usually very careful, and lifted up with all four wheels, came back just to lift up again, and that was below the speed limit. And I think with worse suspension, or if you panic, if I would have made any steering corrections in the air, I think it could have ended fairly badly. Yeah. And people get injured and have died there because their cars rolled. So don't underestimate it, especially if you're not used to it. That is certainly one thing to consider. Watch preferably my video about sand driving, but anyone's video of sand driving who has a clue. About the correct tire pressure, because tire pressure and throttle control is pretty much everything in sand driving. For Fraser Island, I definitely would also recommend some good insect repellent, because on Fraser, especially on the west coast, you can have midges, sandflies, little sandflies. They're nasty, yeah. We found that. I have a good video of that. A friend of mine had a few beers, went into his swag and didn't zip the swag up. And the next morning he would have had over 1,000 bites. He looked like it wasn't a good week for him.
Like a golf ball, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was all the tiny little things, but the first day is actually all right, but day 3, 4, and they stay itchy for a long time. Yeah, that's probably the main takeaways, Be especially on Fraser, be very dingo aware. If you have kids, if you have wives, or if you're not comfortable with wild dogs, you can't just wander off there. You really got to be aware, and always aware. You can't be just sitting at night on the beach and lie down and watch the stars and are not aware what's going on around you. That is something on Fraser take into account. That's obviously Moreton. You don't have that concerns. Right. So you can just, enjoy that in that regards more. Swimming-wise.
What's the situation with fishing? I mean, you're saying there's so much
my name is Fischer, so I should be, but I don't really fish. There's Moreton, probably haven't seen that much, but Moreton also people fish. But on Fraser, you have fishing seasons where the whole eastern beaches are full of fishermen when there's tailor season and so on. There's a lot of fishing going on there. That's for sure. I mean, if you watch my videos on Fraser, we were camping at a vineyard on the west coast, and there were a few blokes from the University of Brisbane next to us, and they caught a great white from the shore and released it. I have some stunning video of that. And just be aware. So if you go swimming there, they go past, you know. Most people on Fraser do not recommend to go swimming in the ocean, especially on Fraser. I think Moreton is a bit better. But that's one of the main migratory roads for sharks there. And you also have, occasionally you can have saltwater crocodiles rocking up. And at the irukandji season, you can have irukandjis there and box jellyfish. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there last year, I think people got stung. So anyway, it's like, you know, everything in Australia is out to kill you.
Yes. Well, it has to have a lot of respect for nature down your way. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's people. I mean, you know, I have friends from Europe who say we don't come because everything is out to kill you. In reality, if you have a bit common sense, I'm still alive.
And you've been there a while.
And I've been there now, I think, 27 years. And my first 5 or 6 years, I wasn't the... You know, until the knowledge comes in, I did a few stupid things, but still alive.
That's called learning by doing, isn't it?
Yes. And if you survive it, it's pretty long-lasting.
Yes. So your kids, are they sort of keen to be with you on these trips as well?
Yeah, my kids, first of all, they have indigenous blood in them from my wife's father's side. So even though it doesn't look like it, but I think there's, you know, it's somewhere in the genes there. And they have been camping with me from a very early age until they were 12 or 13. There were no electronic devices or nothing. So we have, brought them up fairly resilient, self-sufficient. They know camping, they know snakes, they know what to do, what not to do. It's a story here where they took a friend of mine from Germany. My son took him here in the local reserve, which is fairly wild, they're small little tracks. And he was 6 or so, and then a green tree snake comes over the thing. And my friend was all of a sudden, yelling and crying and wanted to climb up the trees. And my son just went and chased the snake away. So yeah, no, they're pretty good. You know, they used to run barefoot until they were 8 or 9. You couldn't get them into shoes. Oh, until they got actually into school, then they had to wear shoes. They're good. They love it. And I dare to say maybe there were more, but my daughter has done cross-country desert explorations with me. I dare to say there are not many white kids, at least over the past 20 years, to have seen as much desert, you know. So yeah, they enjoy that, but now with school and so it's not always that easy, obviously.
Right, nice though.
But yeah, best thing to do: take your kids out if you love camping and if you love that stuff. Get your kids into it as early as you can. There's no better education for them, you know.
I think, yeah, from that point of view, yes, certainly the educational side, but also, as you were saying a moment ago, the increasing number of restrictions everywhere, preventing us doing what we really enjoy. If you don't get the kids involved now, they're going to miss a lot as they age.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's now, you know. I kick myself because I travel with some of the guys who do that much longer than me, and they have seen stuff I can't see anymore. I have seen a lot of stuff my kids can't see anymore, and that just progresses. I don't know, I reckon Australia we maybe have another 10 years, you know, and then that is over. Obviously but that's complicated subject. A lot of the land goes back to the traditional owners. I think nearly half of Australia, and a lot of that then, unless you are a traditional owner, a lot of it has no access anymore. Yeah. And yeah, it doesn't look too good, you know, in regards to freedom and doing things we enjoy, you know. Unfortunately, there are, you know, is a good percentage of people who do it the wrong way, no matter where you come. It can be a remote place. You find rubbish. You find, you know, people ripping up tracks for no reason. There are, unfortunately, is a minority, I hope, you know, who do the wrong thing, but they often spoil it for everyone. because again, in Australia, it seems to be there's only one way around it, and that's closing. The middle ground seems to be missing,
I think I can understand that, especially in Australia, because the land mass is so big. It's difficult to not police in the sense of having the law and the policemen out there, but to monitor what's going on. And therefore, closing something off it's preventive, but it's also, takes so much away.
Yeah, and we have a lot of land, and we must not forget, I think we're getting too deep for that now, but we must not forget that before wild population, that the indigenous community managed the land very well. And it was managed. Wide parts of it were managed. Yeah. And that's usually by fire stick farm, or not farming, but by fire stick, by burning areas at certain times. And that kept that all in check, And that obviously was an ecosystem which developed over, 20, 30, 40, or now I think 60,000 years. It's a current figure. And that worked very well. But once then we came, or the white fella came, that was all replaced. And national parks, now obviously we do, again, backburning and so on. But if you lock up huge tracts of area, then there is no backburning. There's nothing done there. And a lot of that land is just not well managed if it's locked up, even less well managed if it's locked up. And it's just a matter when that big fire comes. And if it's not managed, if it hasn't been backburned, it just will be catastrophic. And we have seen that here a few years ago where, a huge part of New South Wales burned.
Yeah, it was in the news. Well, I tell you what, let's not get on to too much in-depth, not so exciting stuff. What else have you got planned now then? Any new trips on the horizon?
Yeah, I just about to install Starlink. So I gave in. I resisted for Starlink. I have, a few things in my car which make mobile reception better. If there is mobile reception, obviously many parts you don't have. And I'm not that keen actually of having always reception. But with the whole DCS lawsuit and all of that stuff going on, I only have the option be available to my lawyers if I need to be, or not go away. So I now gave in. I have Starlink, which is currently one of the reasons why my car is at the auto electrician. And I'm probably go by myself next week, end of next week, for a week, New England tablelands. I've got some videos there as well. Beautiful part here of New South Wales. And maybe spend a week. And then in December, most trips. I had quite a few trips planned this year. Cape York, Kimberley trip, but because of that DCS stuff, that hasn't happened this year. So this year was a fairly quiet year. Hopefully next year will be again more exciting and more traveling.
Good. Something to look forward to.
Yes, for sure. Maybe we go on a trip together then, if you're here, if that aligns.
That would be good. A really good move, definitely.
No question. If I'm here, you definitely do that if you want.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's wind up for today. And I think maybe sometime in the not too distant future, we'll pick out a topic, even if it's sand driving or something like that. And maybe we can do a little bit of in-depth discussion. I'd certainly like to learn from you, and I'm sure some listeners would as well. So let's aim for that.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me. And I catch you when I catch you.
Absolutely. As usual, it was a wonderful talk. Thanks for tuning in to the At Overland Europe podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and download our app for more adventures and exclusive content. Remember, you can find our guest social media and websites linked in the description below. Until next time, safe travels.